In today's video, I want to talk about a bit more of a sensitive topic, and that is around suicide and schizophrenia. I'm really sad to report that over the years, we've heard from kind of countless individuals who are living with schizophrenia who have grappled with suicidality, or from support people who have lost a loved one to suicide who is living with schizophrenia. A lot of these loved ones who have lost someone to suicide have a lot of questions about, why it happened and what exactly happened, to lead someone to die by suicide who's struggling with an illness like schizophrenia. And so it's my hope that this video will perhaps provide more perspective about why it happens so much with people who are living with schizophrenia. So just to start off with some statistics, the incidence of suicide in the general population, as reported by the World Health Organization, is around 1.5%. So that means 1.5% of the population dies by suicide. This figure alone seems really high, but then when we look at the subset of the population who's living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness, it is way higher. It is around 10% of people who are living with schizophrenia that die by suicide. And this is just the individuals who actually die by suicide, but the number who attempt is even higher, ranging from anywhere between 18 to 55%, but generally accepted that it's around 40% of people who are living with schizophrenia who will attempt suicide at one point or another. Suicide is the largest contributor to the decreased life expectancy of individuals who are living with schizophrenia, and recognizing that this is such a really, big area of concern and risk is something to really be considerate of when we're thinking about how to approach treatment and supporting individuals who are living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness. So I'm going to get into sharing my own experience of what I was, experiencing and going through and what led me to attempt suicide, and also what other people who are living with schizophrenia may be experiencing that could potentially lead to attempting suicide. But first, I just want to go over some risk factors that increase the likelihood of dying by suicide while living with schizophrenia. Being male, being single and living alone, being unemployed, being intelligent or well-educated, which is kind of something that I didn't expect, but when I stop and think about it, it makes sense because perhaps they have a better ability to understand the disappointments of life. I think maybe that's speaking from my own experience of, having higher education and kind of leading me to questioning these things and falling into a bit more of a pit of despair or depression. Good premorbid adjustment or functioning. So what that basically means is that before they were diagnosed with schizophrenia, they lived a pretty good life. They were well adjusted. They perhaps had a good job, friends, family, and that level of capacity or functioning changed when they were diagnosed. And I think this is also something that I experienced where my quality of life kind of deteriorated after, the onset of symptoms and whatnot. And it left me constantly kind of mourning the life I had and getting kind of depressed and upset about how things will never be that way again. Having high personal expectations and hopes, and also having an understanding that life's expectations and hopes are not likely to be met. So that kind of makes sense that those two would go hand in hand, where you have high hopes for your life and yourself and whatnot, but you also have an understanding that those hopes are not likely to be met. And that can be really tough to deal with and depressing ultimately. Having had recent, so within the past 3 months, life events, so this could be some sort of loss, a death of a loved one, loss of a job you valued, whatever it may be, some sort of big life event that was triggering or activating in some way. Having poor work functioning, and then having access to lethal means such as firearms. So that makes sense that if you have access to a means to die, you would be at increased likelihood. Now, a lot of these risk factors are risk factors regardless of if you're living with schizophrenia or not, but some of them pertaining to, premorbid functioning and the change in quality of life post-diagnosis is more in line with someone who's living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness, or really any chronic illness for that matter. So now I want to get into what could potentially be going on with someone who's living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness who is, grappling with suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, and sharing my own experience about what I was experiencing when I attempted suicide. So I think just to start off with, the 2 times that I attempted suicide, I was really in a place of hopelessness and kind of feeling a sense of worthlessness and whatnot. And I think it's important to understand that schizophrenia is a really complex illness where it really shifts and changes how you perceive the world, how your mind works. And it can be really, really difficult to wrap your head around that and to understand that and to live with that. And I think it got me to a place of feeling like things are never going to be better. Things are never going to change from this really, really difficult space of not having control of or not being able to understand the way my mind is working and, the depression that I'm falling into as a result, and feeling this deep, deep sense of hopelessness around that idea, I think was kind of a key tenet of what led me to attempt suicide. Another factor kind of along these lines of feeling like things are never going to get better is if your symptoms are getting worse and your state is kind of deteriorating as a result of schizophrenia, whether it's your mental health is getting worse or your physical health is getting worse as a result of it. That can be really hard to deal with as well and can, make you feel like there's kind of no point in going on. One of the symptoms that comes along sometimes with schizophrenia is also hallucinations. And a type of these hallucinations can also be command hallucinations, where you are hearing a voice saying to do something. And for me, I've experienced, being in a depressed state while also a psychotic state. And these coming together have led to some really distressing command hallucination experiences where I would have voices telling me to self-harm in some way or to die or, unalive myself in some way. And, I think it gets to a point, especially in a deep period of psychosis, where you just want to appease these voices by any means possible. And it leads you to do some things that you might not necessarily otherwise do. I think there's also an element of impulsiveness that can come along with psychotic episodes, which can, make this need to appease command hallucinations even more dangerous and can lead to, tragic outcomes like dying by suicide. Something else that I was experiencing during my 2 suicide attempts was kind of extreme isolation. And this was largely to do with symptoms of my illness, and withdrawal being one of those symptoms and results of my illness, where I didn't want to be around other people and it was hard to reach out for support and it was hard to accept support, and I just wanted to recede and kind of hide. And I think that ultimately this made the suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts worse, and also probably led to creating space for me to actually attempt suicide as well. So isolation can be a big factor. So these are kind of my own experiences about, what led me or why I felt the need to attempt suicide while dealing with my illness of schizoaffective disorder. But I want to get into more reasons why someone who's living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness might turn to suicide. And so I know of a lot of people who have just struggled so deeply with their hallucinations or, symptoms like that, where they just couldn't take going on with it anymore and decided that they just needed to end their experience of that, which results in ending their life. Delusional thinking and, paranoia around questioning reality and things like that can also interplay with a person's, desire to die by suicide. And I think that, schizophrenia is a really weird illness that really infiltrates how a person thinks. And if they get wrapped up in delusional thinking or, paranoid thought and whatnot, it can be really easy to convince themselves that suicide is a good option. Beyond just being directly related to symptoms of living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness, schizophrenia or living with schizophrenia can impact other facets of your life too that could generally decrease life satisfaction and whatnot, which could lead to a decision like wanting to end your life. This can involve things like dealing with your illness leading to poverty or houselessness or substance use or loss of job. It could lead to social exclusion or isolation, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier. Or it could just, intermingle with a loss in your life or something like that, which I talked about in terms of risk factors, kind of for anyone regardless of if they're living with a schizophrenia spectrum illness or not. But I think when it kind of combines with the illness, it can be even more devastating. Another important thing that I want to bring up when talking about the issue of suicide is the language that we use around it. So often I hear people still saying things like committed suicide, but that actually stems from when to die by suicide was actually a crime. And so hence the term usage of committed. But I think it's really important that since the laws have changed, it's no longer a crime to die by suicide, that our languaging needs to change as well to kind of take that criminality that's inflicted on a person when we say committed suicide away, and more using vernacular like died by suicide, attempted suicide, things like that. When I was really, really deep in the throes of suicidal ideation and suicidal thinking, I let it get to a very critical point in terms of not asking for help or accepting help. And I think that early intervention around these types of issues is really, really important. There are a lot of people out there who would really want to help you through something like that. And, I think that there's so much shame and guilt wrapped around feelings or thoughts of suicide and wanting to end your life. It's still something that society kind of is afraid of or afraid to talk about or shies away from, or, like I was saying with the language, still thinks that it's wrong to do it and attributes a level of guilt and shame like that around it. But I think what needs to shift is really understanding it more as a component of the human experience. I think it's not that uncommon to have fleeting thoughts or more intense thoughts of wanting to end your life, because that is, unfortunately perhaps, but it's an option that we have as living beings. And so to not give thoughts that come up about it the weight that they kind of deserve is doing ourselves a disservice in terms of not acknowledging the full breadth of our human experience. And so ultimately what I'm getting at here is that we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. It is very much part of the human experience. It does not make you less than in any way. It's just something that's coming up for you in this stage of your life, and it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to go ask for help around it. There is help out there for you if you're experiencing suicidal ideation or suicidal thinking. If you are worried about someone in your life who you think may be thinking about suicide, be direct, just ask them. And don't be afraid of their answer either. Like I was saying, there's so much shame and guilt wrapped up around this that it often feels like people are afraid to ask someone that they're worried about. But really, that's giving it more weight. And not asking about it is ultimately making it seem like an even bigger issue for the person who is having these thoughts or feelings. And so don't be afraid to just directly ask, hey, are you thinking about suicide? And don't be afraid of their answer. If they say yes, okay, be ready to talk about that with them as well. And now on the flip side, if you are someone who yourself is struggling with thoughts of suicide or suicidal ideation, I just want you to know that you are not alone in this. I myself have experienced this, and I know that there are countless other people who are struggling with this issue as well. And I know the weight of it. I know how heavy it feels and how it feels like you're the only one experiencing this, or that you're alone in that struggle of experiencing it, but you are not. I have experienced it as well, and I know that there are people around you, people in your life who would want to help you navigate these thoughts as well. If you are experiencing suicidal thoughts and are in imminent danger of harming yourself, please take yourself to the nearest emergency room department or call a crisis line. When I was experiencing suicidal thinking, kind of chronically, it really did feel like it was always going to be this way. But I hope that me sitting here right now telling you that it's not like that for me anymore provides some sort of glimmer of hope. I can't guarantee you that you will get to a similar place where you don't feel that way anymore, but there is absolutely hope that that can happen. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.